We're all waiting for the apocalypse to happen. We're going, oh no, the apocalypse might happen. Very few of us are going, oh, the apocalypse happened. Now we're dealing with it. Let's go deal with it. We've all had enough changes in our personal lives that there are things to deal with. There are new things to cope with. There are new situations that we have to adjust to. And we're still waiting for the other shoe to drop. We need the comet to actually hit Earth. It doesn't matter that it did a flyby, we need it to land, and then we'll deal with the problem. Our own personal version of the apocalypse has already arrived to every person. If we go and we tend to our personal apocalypse, I think we're going to be at much greater advantage. And if another bigger thing happens, we'll know. We don't need to watch for it. Someone will tell us. If something bigger than what has already happened this year, someone will tell us. It's pretty weird to assume that you should be able to wake up in the morning and kill it at achieving your day. You're small, easily tired out, and you have problems. What makes you think that with no preparation, you have the right to achieve anything worthwhile without seriously taking care of yourself first? Now, if you're currently jumping out of bed and achieving things, and this belief strengthens your ability to achieve, then it's a useful truth for you, and you should keep believing it. But most people believe they should be able to wake up and do amazing things, and then spend the rest of their day wallowing in guilt because they don't. So stop assuming a normal person should be able to wake up and be a badass without preparation. Stop assuming you shouldn't need self-care. Stop assuming you're weird because you appear pathetic and sad to yourself and can't get anything done. It's kinda normal, which means if you want out, then you have to do something abnormal. It takes health and sanity, and you have to work to nurture yourself into a position of greater capability if you want to achieve at a higher level than you're achieving now. So go take care of yourself and make yourself strong. Don't assume you should just be able to handle it. Go make yourself capable of handling it. One of the biggest problems that people run into when they try to make things better is they try to make everything better. That's a terrible idea, because everything is a lot. So you make the tiniest thing better, and you go, did it work? And then you try again. The reason why we struggle to do this is because selfish people make the mistake of making themselves a priority. Selfish people make themselves a priority, and it makes things worse. And we don't want that. We see selfish people do that, and we go, I'm not going to do that. So we assume that the selfish behavior is what caused it. But really, it was more a lack of prioritization, lack of perspective on the world, lack of positive behavior towards others. It's not actually the selfishness that caused the harm. We have to go and okay, I'm going to be selfish so that I can be better and be better for others. Most of the people that aren't selfish enough are the ones that want to help and make things better. So I won't be selfish. But it's no, be selfish so you can help. The thing about artists that is often really misunderstood is artists to some degree naturally are gonna create. That's not an issue. The issue is everything else. Artists that want to create a lot of art, they go and they try to focus on making great art, and then their lives fall into shambles. Because it's dude, that wasn't your problem. You're an art making machine. Your DNA is structured to just make stuff. So what you do is instead you work on your life. Optimize your life for artistic creation, where it's okay, I know in my healthiest form, I naturally make things. And almost every artist look at themselves and see that that's true. So if that's true, then focusing on creating more art, it's almost silly. If you know that when you're a happy, healthy, balanced, comfortable individual, it just comes. So you focus on all of these things that artists hate focusing on. And then you create art. Decluttering the tasks. It's difficult because we feel like we own our tasks too. We feel oh man, this is my responsibility, and when I do it, it gets done right. There's all sorts of reasons to not give somebody else a task. Just like there's all sorts of reasons not to get rid of last year's Christmas sweater. For you, decluttering tasks is a really good route. And once again, it's not easy. Weirdly, I'm trying to make it a big deal. A lot of times we have things that we're oh yeah, I should get that done. And because we think of it as in oh, it's just that little thing, we don't get it done. But if we go, oh no, that's really hard and I'm gonna do it, it's easier to achieve it. It's difficult and you should totally do it. You just need to find somebody that can handle that task. At first, it won't work and it'll be annoying. And then you'll do it anyway. And eventually it'll get easier. You don't know how to pass off a role. If you don't know how to pass off the role, you have to learn the skill of passing off the role. It's this weird thing where we need to get things off of your plate, but in order to do that, we have to put on your plate the skill of getting things off your plate. The problem is you're at the stage now where you need boxed thinkers so that you can do less less box thinking. It's frustrating because people that aren't box thinkers don't want to go hang out and spend more time with box thinkers. But for you to do what you do best, you have to work with them so that they can take some of these things on. It's a tricky psychology thing of what gets us to one place doesn't get us to the next place. It's like what got us here is taking on jobs, taking on tasks, taking on responsibility. What gets you to the next place is handing that over. It's a really strange thing to adapt to, but that's the way it works. You get to a certain point and you have to change your default wiring. Like you trained your default wiring. When you see a task, you immediately think, how can I get this done? And now when you see a task, you have to think, who could do this? Find a way to get more out of the time. Maybe you do hire the guy to just be there for the actual pressure washing time. You're gonna get much higher quality content probably because you have somebody moving around doing stuff. That's more effective. And also you're done a lot faster. You might have saved an hour because moving cameras is slow. The only reason why it works is because I've set things up in such a way that I barely ever have to change things. If you're an introvert and you've been feeling guilty because you're happier and more relaxed than you've ever been as a result of the recent global shift in how we behave, I'd encourage you to not bother. You have more important things you need to be doing. Yes, be sympathetic to your extrovert friends who are struggling, but they've had an entire life to be at an advantage. You have 1 to 5 years at maximum, and your happiness in this moment of global quiet time doesn't increase your extrovert friends' suffering. It actually helps them. There are inventions to be made, and you have enough mental and emotional bandwidth to make them. There are novels to be written and there are fortunes to be made. This is the era of the introvert, so go shoot your shot. Here's a money philosophy that's way more intricate than it seems. You've all heard the phrase, spend less money than you make, but it's hard to understand how truly powerful this concept is. Think of your life as an ecosystem. It's full of work, relationships, activities, eating, sleeping, sexy times, driving, medical insurance, life. And your ecosystem can either grow or shrink. Growing makes you happy, shrinking makes you sad. You don't want the same sex tomorrow. You want better sex. You don't want worse food tomorrow. You want better food. A steady increase in the quality of life sends signals to our brain that we're moving in the right direction. And the more capable we feel of increasing our quality of life, the more empowered we feel. So if our increase in quality of life is limited by our ability to spend, we feel terrible because becoming better feels outside the bounds of our day-to-day life. So our ability to spend has to increase faster than our quality of life. More in part 2. Your income and investments should exist outside this ecosystem of life in a wider circle. If your expenses are less than your income, then your ability to expand as a person is more present and real in your life. This is extremely difficult to achieve because to do this, you have to voluntarily limit your spending. You have to voluntarily limit yourself. But limiting yourself by choice is empowering, and feeling limited by your situation is disempowering. And as difficult and uncomfortable as it is to decide you won't spend all your money, it's way less painful than when you spend all of your money and the world tells you that you still can't afford everything you wanted. Creating your own financial boundaries by choice is less painful than running into the real ones. If you voluntarily limit your use of resources so that you always have a little extra, then you will always feel more capable, free, and powerful than you would otherwise, which can lead you to start living a life beyond your imagination. More in part 3. When you start living inside an ecosystem that costs less money to maintain than you make, when your day-to-day life costs less than the money you bring in, you're generally much more content. But what's more than that is you're more empowered, clear-headed, and capable. You can start to see the world through a lens of opportunity, choice, and growth instead of fear and limitation. If you expand your financial capability at a faster pace than your overall life expenses, then your ability to choose expands with it. Because we don't just want to grow, we want to know we can grow. And financial resources that aren't being used for expenses can be leveraged to create more wealth faster, which means that your outer financial circle can begin to accelerate. At which point your inner circle can start to accelerate too, as long as it's always at a slightly slower rate of acceleration than the outer circle. This is how life can get really good really fast. It takes time and intense effort to get started saving, investing, and consciously limiting your expenses while increasing income. But over time, the results are beyond anything you can imagine. More in part 4. I want to emphasize that you have to be happy within the circle of limitations that you set up for yourself. Maybe not content, but you have to set it up in such a way that you enjoy it. And I say that the results are beyond what you can imagine because if you aren't currently doing this, if you're currently feeling limited by the world around you and you're living in a state of restriction and worry, you literally can't imagine your best life. Your brain's not capable of it. And it's not because you're stupid, it's because you're brilliant. You're living in a life where your options are limited and you don't have control over them. So your brain, the magical machine that it is living waking up to that reality. It's not thinking of all the cool shit you could do because your brain knows it's not an option, but if you shift reality and choose to limit yourself so that instead of chasing options and taking everything you can until you hit a wall, you're actually deciding not to take certain options, now you're living in a world of abundance where you have the ability to decide what happens next. And once your mind realizes that you get to decide what happens next, it will start to come up with better ideas. Because now you're a god. Some people fail because they plan too much. Others fail because they plan too little. And it's very important to understand your own personal tendency. People who plan too much get distracted from their goals. They spend their life learning the fundamentals and forget why they're learning them. They have trouble attempting to create the finished product, and they are often frustrated that they have achieved a high skill level at something, but still aren't doing what they want to do. These are the people that focus on the thing before the thing. People who plan too little dive into their ideas. They grab them by the balls and give it a shot, and they fail a lot because they realize too late they needed more knowledge, understanding, and skill before attempting something so challenging. These are the people that refuse to do anything other than the thing. Achievement is a constant balance and interplay between the two concepts. Sometimes you must prepare, sometimes you must try. If you only do one or the other, you'll either lose because you never tried, or you'll lose because you weren't ready. One of the issues that we know is common, like when somebody grows up poor, is you look at the world from a limited point of view. The poverty mindset is, I thought I had an advantage, so maybe I'll just go with it and that'll keep me alive. And then the other is, when you are in the art world, a lot of people have the mentality of, well, if you don't make money doing the thing that is your art, then it's not real. And it's easy to fall for that. Take over your narrative of how you make your choices. Money is one thing, and what you choose to do with your life is another thing. There are set, known ways to make more money. If you do those things, you can make more money. But when you grow up poor, you don't look at it that way. You have a much more limited perspective on it. There was a web bubble, then it crashed, and the viable companies made it through and created massive amounts of wealth. There was a crypto bubble, and the better cryptocurrencies are making big waves now. There's a social media and tech bubble happening right now. Some will survive and make the world better. These were all innovation-based bubbles. They had the right idea, just too much enthusiasm. I think the fintech, automation, and genomics bubbles are about to begin. Introverts are outnumbered by extroverts, 3-to-1. There are way more extroverts than there are introverts. And your entire life, you've probably apologized for not being able to cope with situations that are considered normal. Now, we're in a cultural situation of distancing that isn't considered normal, and you're coping just fine, possibly thriving. So don't waste this precious time feeling sorry for extroverts. The best thing you can possibly do for the world is take advantage of this moment of quiet. Okay, so we finally hit the year of introverts. Go write 3 novels. Go invent your best invention, and go be happy. Extroverts have not spent the last 200,000 years feeling sorry for introverts. And just because you're more observant, deeper thinking, and therefore understand better what the extroverts are going through, doesn't mean you need to spend the next year to 5 years feeling sorry for them. You need to go live your best life, because that will help everyone. There will be more millionaires made in the next 5 years than ever before in history. The history books record the time of the Great Depression and afterwards as being a time full of suffering and poverty. That's only partially true, because history books are usually written by poor people. Yes, there was a downturn in the economy that resulted in a lot of job losses and poverty during the Depression, but some of the most fortunes were made during that time as well, because in times of chaos, someone who is willing to step in and make a useful change is rewarded massively, and people who are struggling are more willing to consider and accept those changes. Be that change. If you want to innovate and solve problems, do not wait until things go back to normal, because this is the time that rewards innovation and problem solvers. If you want to build a fortune, start now, because the next time you get an opportunity this good, you'll be 80 years old. To have a conversation with a person who perceives time differently than you, it's important to understand how that time perception changes meaning. For someone who naturally thinks long-term, the phrase, "I hate apples," means over the course of my life, I've had multiple events in which I've eaten apples, and it's consistently been a negative experience. Please don't ever give me apples. For someone who thinks on a shorter time scale, the same phrase means, over the course of my life, I've eaten apples many times, so I know what they are, and right now, the idea of an apple feels terrible. To someone who lives on a longer time scale, the second example seems like an improper use of the phrase, "I hate apples." It feels misleading because they often assume the short-term person will always hate apples, and they're upset when the same person is happily munching on an apple the next day. But in actuality, they're both true. The first example is logical. The second example is emotional. They're the same phrase with a completely different context. Don't assume there is a promise of future truth within every sentence. It will make you resentful and unable to deal with people who live in the moment. Different people live on different timescales. This is a really common source of misunderstandings. Some people are wired to live in a more present moment. These people are often more expressive about a day-to-day change that happens in their life, but adapt to it more quickly. Others are more wired for long-term thinking. These people often appear less bothered by a small day-to-day shift. Because they are looking at the longer outcome, they actually take longer to adjust. They're both incredibly valuable types of people. We need both, and we all need to be a little bit of both. But it can help to understand that when you talk to someone about a particular event or change, they might be looking at it from a different perception of time than you do. And it may give you an edge to shift the conversation towards a positive outcome. Winter is coming. Tyler, I challenge you to learn the Wim Hof method and to take an ice bath. Art is close to something like an addiction for somebody who's naturally creative. We want to do it on the most fundamental level. We want to create. If at all possible, we'll create to our destruction. We'll just keep going because that's what we want to do. So if that's the case, going for a walk in the nice, pleasant sun is the most gross, annoying, unproductive thing we can imagine. Which one do you need to make yourself do? Make the thing that you already want to make, or make yourself go for a walk? Art is just going to happen if you're structured well. So you have to focus on the structure. You want to move towards this scenario where you wake up and you feel relatively all right. If you don't feel relatively all right, you have a set of things that will get you more towards all right, and maybe even good. Make things work not in the most effective way, but in the way that makes you most effective. You have to work not in the way that is the most classically efficient, but the way that makes you really efficient. Because everybody functions differently according to different rules. And also another thing is progress is really wasteful. A lot of us forget that, or we don't know it to begin with, is that moving quickly, creating lots of stuff, moving forwards in general, it creates waste. So content creation is a great example of something that's designed to be moved quickly, and it has to progress fast and grow. There's a degree of waste that goes along with that kind of creative process. You're not going to save every piece of raw footage and get the exact right place for that raw footage. You figure out what places you can waste. What am I willing to let go of to focus on getting things moving? The ability you seek is available through conscious ineptitude. You have to know you're going to suck and then go with it. Your mind works like a series of points and connections. Every piece of new information is a new point, and every increase in your skill level is a new connection. The scary part is that every time you add a new point, all the dots and connections stutter. The older and the more trained in they are, the less they do. But the reason you make a mistake on a piece of music you know well when you introduce a new playing technique is the same reason you have trouble at work right after realizing someone you cared about lied to you. The only way to level up and master your new universe is to embrace it and live it. Once you do that, new connections between new points of information will be solidified, and you'll regain balance at a higher level of knowledge and experience. Why does Warren Buffett give conflicting advice? He says that 99% of investors should buy an index fund that tracks the S&P 500 and then forget about it. He's also said that diversification is a terrible mistake. These two viewpoints are very conflicting, but the reason is very simple. The answer changes depending on what level of the game you're playing at. 99% of investors don't care about investing, they don't know a lot about investing, and they would rather be doing something else. And diversification is protection against ignorance. That 99% of investors should be buying index funds. But the other 1% cares. They have studied businesses carefully, and they have a pretty good idea of a business that's going to outperform the market. If one of those investors doubts his own idea, hedges his bets with index funds, and doesn't invest as heavily as he could have in the company he believed was worth his study, time, and money, he will regret it deeply and not make nearly the profits that he could have. Never forget to ask yourself, what level of the game am I playing at? Because the answers change. I'm doing another video on Tesla, honestly, because I found this picture and it has to be spread across the internet as much as possible. It just has to. So let's talk about how important it is to only care about a couple things in life. Caring about things, for most people, means being invested. It means devoting time and energy to one thing to the detriment of other things. And people don't have an infinite amount of time, energy, or care. This is a natural law. And this is why people who care about everything are often depressed, ineffective, and ultimately boring to be around. They've flattened themselves into puddles of caring, trying to spread themselves over as many aspects of the universe as possible, until they're indistinguishable from things they care about and lose their own sense of personal identity. It's one of the most disempowering behaviors I know of. The people in this photo do not care what you think about how they look in these shorts, because that would be exhausting and a waste of time. So the moral of the story is, wear bright red shorts. Obviously. There's a difference between understanding and skill, and not knowing the difference will destroy your practice. Understanding is the thing in your head. Understanding is imaginary skill. Understanding is the picture of skill. It's the presence of the skill before you actually have it. Skill itself is ability. It's the ability to execute on the understanding of your mind. But it's way too easy to tie your ego to your ability to understand and forget that what really matters is, can you do the thing? We tend to take on problems on our own, where it's like, well, I gotta solve this. The real trick is learning to kind of outsource the solution. It's very easy if you just flip more mentally in that direction. You might be able to move forwards pretty quickly. 99% of the really high level developers that I know, ask them any question and then be like, how did you figure this out? They'll go, I Googled it. It's kind of infuriating, but like what they've done is they've developed a different skill. They've developed the ability to find answers. They didn't focus on trying to become the best. They focused on trying to become the best at finding answers. Somebody who is willing to not rely on themselves is valuable. So why might the housing market crash instead of go through the roof? The first reason involves a possible holiday on capital gains tax. If people don't have to pay taxes on the sale of their house, they'll want to sell quickly and be willing to sell at a lower price. For example, if you sold a house for $100 and paid a 20% tax, then you'd make $80. But if there was no tax, then you'd be happy to sell the house for $90 instead of $100 because you'd still make more money, and money's great. The second reason is with the job losses and folks not being able to afford rent. Eventually, a large number of evictions are likely to occur, and if new renters can't be found, rental property owners will need to sell their rental houses to stay afloat. And third, the homeowners who have mortgages will have the same thing happen to them and begin foreclosing if they can't make their mortgage payments. All three of these events would make the number of houses for sale increase, which could result in a dip in the housing market. Hold on, so I just got a following for the first time in my life, which is pretty cool. And I'm amazed at all the awesome interactions, and I don't want it to end. I don't know if TikTok is going to get banned or not, but just in case, would you be up for following me on Instagram? I haven't figured out what to do yet, but I'd like to keep doing what I'm doing now, making videos about music and finance and whatever else comes to mind. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, and you like my music talks and my money talks, please spread this far and wide and help me not disappear. People keep talking about how insane the valuations in the markets are right now. Let's look at some ridiculous math. Maybe it's not what you think. Here's the M3 money supply at the beginning of the year, and here's the M3 money supply at the end of this year. We have about 3.4 trillion more US dollars wiggling around the United States, which is very close to stimulus plus stimulus. Also, the total market cap of the US stock market is $36 trillion. The $3.4 trillion increase, if you do maths, is 9.4% of the entire stock market. And we know that when a government prints money, the smartest thing to do is buy assets with it. And the stock market is one of the easiest places to buy assets. This might make you think the stock market should go up 9%, but there's another factor. A dollar in a business is worth more than a dollar because dollars move around and that adds value. The velocity of money is roughly 1.44. So multiply the percent increase by the velocity of money and you get 13.5%. So maybe the stock market went up 13.5% if we did indeed just toss our money into the market. Well, VTI, the Vanguard Total Stock Market ETF, is up 17.9%, which is definitely not 13.5. But what about from January to February? That was already slow growth that was factored in before we started printing money. We were up 5.23% in February, so let's remove that from how much the stock market is up. 12.67% is awfully close to 13, which is pretty crazy because I didn't do any of the math before writing this. I just guessed there might be a similarity in the stimulus in the market movement. So maybe we did indeed just throw all our money in the stock market. And maybe the valuations aren't as weird as you think, except that last 0.33%, which was obviously me hodling Bitcoin. Come up with bad ideas. A lot of them. The ability to come up with ideas is a skill, and anything that's a skill is naturally something you're pretty bad at when you start doing it. This means you have to come up with bad ideas in order to come up with good ones. Perfectionism gets in the way of good ideas because perfectionism has its roots in a static mindset. The belief of, I'm either talented or I'm not, instead of the understanding that if I work on this, I will get better. And the most effective solution is to come up with lots of bad ideas and observe as they become steadily better over time, proving to yourself the truth that if you work on something, you will get better at it until that truth becomes so real in your mind that it becomes automatic to spring into action instead of waiting for inspiration. If large institutions moved 1% of their alternative asset allocation into Bitcoin, then Bitcoin would be worth $36,000. There's roughly $9 trillion worth of gold in the world. If Bitcoin matches the market cap of gold, then the price would be about $500,000 per Bitcoin. If this happened and the value of the dollar was cut in half over the next 40 years like it was in the previous 40 years, then that would be awfully close to $1 million a coin. I don't actually care about any of this. None of this means anything without real human behavior behind it. I'm interested in the fact that a billionaire is currently buying $2,000 of Bitcoin every second. That Grayscale Bitcoin Trust owns more than 500,000 Bitcoin, and they're buying more Bitcoin per month than are being mined. And that institutional investors are preparing their funds to be ready to buy in when a Bitcoin ETF is finally released in the public markets. These aren't the actions of rookie retail investors excited about a trend. These are the actions of wealthy people, preparing to make Bitcoin just another boring thing they own that is part of a logically risk-adjusted portfolio. Now that's interesting. People are debating whether or not Bitcoin will succeed or even if it will work. Bitcoin is now the largest financial service in the world, just having beat Visa. It's about to surpass Berkshire Hathaway in market cap, and it's already bigger than 92 other currencies. This begs the question, what is your definition of success? Because this is a stupid debate. Bitcoin already succeeded, it works, and people don't realize that they aren't arguing over whether or not it will succeed anymore. They're arguing over whether or not it will win first place, and they don't know it. In investing, it doesn't matter if it will win first place. What matters is whether or not it's a good investment that will go up in value. Right now, I've invested as much as I can into Bitcoin, and as more cash flow comes in, I'll invest more. People are distracted by an irrelevant argument from an opportunity that's right in front of them. There's a problem of understanding what common knowledge is for. Corn is healthy. Never be aggressive ever. Never invest on margin. These are 3 examples of common knowledge. But to understand them, you need to understand their purpose. Corn is healthy, prevents starvation and death. It helped people survive for centuries. It doesn't actually mean it's healthy. It just means you'd better eat some if you don't have anything else. Never be aggressive is an attempt to prevent hyper-aggressive people from becoming violent. The narrative isn't for mild-mannered passive people who enjoy being kind to others. It influences those people to be doormats with no personal boundaries. Never invest on margin prevents people who are highly risk-tolerant and enthusiastic or ignorant from losing everything they own. Margin won't kill you. It's not poison. It's just a dangerous tool you have to be very, very careful with. Common knowledge exists to solve big, immediate emergencies that come from mistakes people commonly make. So examine the narrative, understand why it exists, extract the wisdom from the sentiment, and make your own choices. It's extremely useful to learn the difference between discomfort and damage. The sensation of discomfort is a warning that your body and mind uses to tell you that damage may be occurring or about to occur. But it's not always true. Sometimes it's just discomfort. And learning to handle discomfort without damage makes you stronger. Putting yourself in safe situations where you're uncomfortable is known to be one of the most effective ways to grow in almost any part of your life. But if you can't tell the difference between the two, you'll have no choice but to react to your discomfort with fear and avoidance. The way to take ownership of improvement is to learn to see them separately so that you can voluntarily experience discomfort more often while reducing the damage that occurs in your life. This results in healing and growth. These are the most frequently used apps of 2020, and these are the apps with the most used minutes per day. Sorry, TikTok. You'll probably be on both lists next year. I think it's valuable to realize that you may have never heard of some of these, and it's doubtful that you could have predicted many of them. Remember, everybody's still on Earth at the moment, but they don't live in the same world you do. The things that you want are difficult to achieve. If you want to develop a skill, get fit, make money, have better friends, or to have multiple people ask you to do terrible things in bed with you and cuddle afterwards with lots of giggles, then you have to do difficult things to accomplish this. You have to grow and risk and expose yourself. You have to be vulnerable and dangerous, and it's hard. You wouldn't want it if it weren't difficult, because the difficulty of it is part of the reason you value it. Yes, there is an element of moving away from suffering. The release of tension from struggle is a motivator to get you to do some things, to get you to move your life forwards in some ways. And yes, it's important to learn to live effortlessly without unnecessary pain. But if you really want to move forwards, you have to let go of the idea of the easy path, because if it actually existed, you would despise it. Because you want the things you want because they're difficult, not in spite of it. It's a feature, not a bug. Why does food matter so much? It's how you survive, but it's beyond survival we seek. We want expression, connection, and individuality. And food is a means to those things. In my childhood, I found meaning in making others smile and delighting them through my cooking. As I grew older, it became a way to set myself apart. I was a person of taste, I knew things, and had preferences, and it made me me. Now, my diet is limited due to health issues, but my taste buds have adapted to find curiosities and nuance within what I eat anyway. It's a personal exploration, an internal journey. Food is anything you make it, just like art. Because you don't have to go outside of your kitchen to a gallery to express yourself. You just have to notice what's right in front of you. Gratitude is a tool. It serves a purpose, and you shouldn't be grateful because it's the right thing to do, or because you've been guilted into believing you have more than you deserve. You probably do, it's just not the point. And you shouldn't be grateful because someone you fear but don't really like looks at you and says, "You should be grateful," with the sternly ignorant and vapid stare. You should be grateful because it's useful to you. Because you have the capacity to control what your mind notices. Because when your mind notices the right things, you function better. And because when you're grateful, your mind starts to notice those right things. You can define your thoughts, and gratitude is one of the most leveraged ways of doing it. Noticing everything that goes wrong is how you survive. Noticing what goes right is how you thrive. So be grateful, bitches, because it works. How do I improve my state of self-awareness? Begin by deciding on what aspect of awareness you'd like to work on. You can work on any of your senses or different aspects of your thoughts, or train in awareness of others in social situations and turn it inwards once you've developed the skill. It doesn't matter what you pick, but it matters very much that you pick something, because the main reason people struggle to progress at anything is from too broad of a goal. So work on physical sensations of body movement and go down that rabbit hole, or start by trying to identify negative loops in your mind and breaking their rhythm, or work on listening to bird calls very carefully to tell the differences between them and then notice what thoughts distract you. Always notice what distracts you and then let it go. Do this over and over again until you begin to let go of things before they distract you. Repeatedly, notice one thing, notice your distraction, and let it go. Through this, you'll start to notice deeper and deeper layers of yourself as you focus on one aspect of being. You know how people say you should just buy and hold index funds? Index funds were invented in 1975, so what we know about their economic impact is basically nothing. We do know that the man who invented them, John Bogle, said that if everybody indexed, the markets would fail. We know that when humans discover something that works, we like to do it as much as possible. And we also know that almost 85 cents of every retirement dollar flows into a passive index fund. Everybody is indexing. In other words, index funds that were a useful tool 20 years ago are now a religion. The index funds that are supposed to track the market are starting to define the market. When you treat something like it's the solution for everything, it usually fails under the pressure. Buying and holding index funds without another thought might be more dangerous than you think. These are the things I'm personally invested in with a 5-year outlook because I believe their upside is absurd and their downside is small. Tesla. They had a price run up, but I think they have plenty more to go. People don't understand what the phrase "one more gigafactory" actually means because it's too big to comprehend. Square. They've barely gotten started, but when a bank spends $2,000 on customer acquisition and a digital wallet spends $20, I think I'll go with the digital wallet. Bitcoin. The market cap for Bitcoin is about 200 billion and the market cap for gold is 8 trillion. If Bitcoin becomes even a partial replacement for gold, the growth will be enormous. Palantir. This company is going to run the world before you notice them. They're older than Facebook, but just went public. They embrace complexity instead of the simplicity most tech companies thrive on. They specialize in making data make sense. Their competition is with a company's desire to build their own software in-house, and they build their products 5 years before they predict the world will actually realize they need them. I'm currently holding Tesla and Square and buying into Bitcoin and Palantir, and I think there will be more buy opportunities for all four. When you're a productive person with ambition, there's no end to the things you should do. So eventually you have to decide you'll stop. Otherwise you will only stop from exhaustion when there is no other option and you will be consumed with guilt. So don't make the mistake of only putting limits on your pleasure. You have to consciously limit your pain too. I did some more maths. This time I looked at the M3 money supply, which is all of the dollars that exist over the past 60 years. In case it's not obvious enough, the numbers get bigger. I took the percentage increase or decrease over every month of every year, then I found the average monthly increase and multiplied that by 12 to get the yearly increase. And I projected forwards to see how many dollars would exist 80 years from now. In other words, possibly within your lifetime. And the answer is almost $4 quadrillion. Be a magician. A magician is someone who, through a willingness to transform, develops the ability to transform others. Magic is in everything, and the way to use it is through skill.
Jaded people believe that magic fades through understanding, but magicians understand that seeing something more clearly allows you to see the magic in the mundane. Walk through the world knowing that your words have power, and the more skillfully you speak, the more forceful they are. The magician is a guide and a counselor and a listener and a teacher who sits in a place of awareness and confidence despite being flawed and human. You have the capacity to transform the world because you have a willingness to transform yourself, and you're powerful as fuck. We tend to build up a task in our minds, and then when we set out to do it, only a very small part of it actually gets done. So maybe you've been putting off seeing an accountant. So you build up the task in your mind, imagining every little detail that you have to go through in order to deal with the accountant. When you do this, you turn it into one big idea in your mind. Calling the accountant, finding information, verifying, tracking down forgotten items, they all become one identity in your mind. So you finally take the plunge. You give your accountant a call with that powerful level of commitment to do everything. And the first step is to turn over 3 documents and wait a week. Now you feel zero accomplishment because you were committed to doing the whole thing, and that giant project is hanging over you, so the next step takes even more energy to do. A better solution would have been to just think, I need to call the accountant and hand over 3 documents. Or, I need to start the project, not finish it. Take the smallest action you can do now. Connecting the dots to see the big picture on tasks is useful to figure out what to do, but taking them back apart and only seeing the next step is how you actually get it done. A lot of things in life are simple, but difficult. And it's easy to hide those things behind the word complicated. It's much easier to protect your ego by saying, oh, it's just so complicated, anyone could have messed that up, than to face up to the fact that no, you were just smaller than you thought you were, and what you tried to do was too difficult. But when you can learn to go ahead and say without shame, yeah, that was really simple, and I still couldn't do it. Now you get to meet yourself. You get to know yourself and what your capabilities are. You aren't hiding behind your theoretical potential, so now you can take the steps that will get you closer to what you want. Be dangerous, because you are anyways. There are a lot of meaningful reasons to embrace your inner strength and to become a dangerous person. And a lot of people use these arguments for developing that strength. I have a simpler one. You're already dangerous. People who want to be nice all the time and refuse to believe in their capacity for evil, aggression, or any number of other not so nice things are walking time bombs because they are ignoring parts of themselves. And the parts of yourself you ignore are the ones you have the least control over. So whether you're the strongest or the softest person on earth, you're still dangerous because people are immensely capable. So if the idea of embracing your inner shadow and developing a capacity to be dangerous feels like too much of a stretch for you, then just go ahead and recognize that you're a person and people are dangerous. So you might as well use it to develop healthy boundaries and push yourself towards the life you want. This is the process that allows for the most predictably positive results in learning while still allowing for intuitive leaps. Imagine there are 4 steps to something you're trying to learn. At any point, you are welcome to try all 4 steps, but it's challenging, so you have to break it down into pieces to really learn it. This is the process. Step 1, Step 2. Now steps 1 and 2 together. Step 3, Step 4, Steps 3 and 4, Steps 2 and 3, Steps 1, 2, 3, and Steps 2, 3, 4. It might seem obvious, but it's highly unlikely you're actually applying this process, and this is the process that works. These combinations allow you to study each step individually and the transition between the steps. It could be a process with 3 steps or 500. It doesn't matter. This is the most predictable and dependable way to learn something.
Problems have so many commonalities. It's very easy to do the cop-out of making your problem special. It's very easy to excuse your problem by exposing all of the unique angles. But at its core, so often, the problem is something somebody fixes day in and day out. And we can just hand it to them and say, hey, can you fix it? And they go, it's fixed, done. And you go, thanks, all right. And then you move on. And we run our heads against that wall so many times, especially in the business world. We just ram against it over and over and over again. I think that's one of the big bottlenecks in business development. I think it's one of the big bottlenecks in the things we pursue in general is we just don't have the default question of who could do this. Our default question is, how do I fix it? We just have to switch our thinking to who can resolve this.
If you're coming out of depression and chronic fatigue and struggling with the process, then think of your energy levels and the types of activities you do in 4 quadrants. High energy, low energy, high energy activities, and low energy activities. High and low energy are what state you're in. High and low energy activities are what you're doing. If you're coming out of the depressive state, then you'll likely have more energy, which will inspire you to do exciting energetic activities, which are draining and tiresome. So you'll find yourself in a lower energetic state, which is totally normal and fine. But if you aren't used to having energy and you aren't monitoring your state, then you'll keep trying to do high energy activities and feel bad for not doing well. This will easily kick off depression. This whiplash of healing and then going overboard once your energy levels have returned is super destructive to your health and self-worth. Being high energy and low energy are both totally okay, but you have to match your behavior to your state without holding yourself to unrealistic expectations and punishing yourself, or bad things happen. People tend to think long-term retirement planning is pathetic and not enough. But let's say you invest $500 a month. That's $6,000 a year. In 5 years, at 8% growth, you have a bit more than 35 grand. This is more than enough money to leverage a real estate deal. Let's say the real estate deal was a good one that gets you an extra 30 grand and that grows at 4% plus the increase in net worth from rental payments of $350 a month. Now you have two portfolios, real estate and investments. In 20 years, you'd have almost $400,000. In 40 years, you'd have almost $2 million, an extra $500,000 from one house. Retirement investing isn't the end goal. It's the first step that gives you more opportunities to take better next steps.
I really like something said about online advertising where it's like you spend online advertising for two reasons. You either spend to learn something or you spend to employ a strategy that you know works. You're either testing or you're spending on the answer to the test. And if you know which one you're on, then usually you can think pretty clearly about it. And the place where people lose tons of money in online advertising is in the middle ground where it gets muddy of like, I don't know, maybe this will get me clients. I'll spend some extra, see what happens. You're either figuring out more of what's happening or you have something that you know works and you're going to buckle down on it and spend more on it.
The problem with trying things is when they register as failures. Somebody who's halfway growing a startup company to $1 billion, they no longer perceiving failures the same way. They're like, well, it worked this much, so try that. Didn't work? Okay, try that. Didn't work? Okay, try that. And they'll go through a million things because to them it's not failure, it's testing. Because the company's winning, obviously. We're just testing. It's not a failure. So in your own life, you have to figure out how to be like, I'm just testing, but I'm winning, so it's great. I'm happy to try the next thing. A lot of people don't realize that the biggest factor in investing is in their psychology. Imagine you want to invest, but you want lots of money, so retirement investing seems dumb because you have bigger dreams than that. But you're not doing anything right now, so you start with something we already know works, basic long-term investing. So you invest $10 a week for a month. Now you have something, and you had a month to research what to do next. So you buy some stock, and now you invest $20 a week for a month. Now you can start to see the potential, so now 40 a week for a month, and then 80 for a month. At this point, if you are 20 years old, you can retire at 65 with $1.6 million. But now your identity has changed. Now you're the person who invests money. So you start getting excited. You start finding new ways to invest. You figure out how to retire when you're 50 while continuing this long-term strategy, then 40, then 35. All because you did something you thought was pathetic for 4 months. If you tell yourself that you need to rest and you don't rest, then it's often the case that you're putting the idea of rest into the wrong mental box. We tend to look at rest as a pleasurable thing, like a treat or a guilty pleasure. But a guilty pleasure is something you indulge in, even when you're trying not to. And if you know you need rest and you're not doing it, then you don't want to rest. People sit in confusion, wondering why they're having so much trouble maintaining themselves, when they're calling something they don't want to do that usually fills them with guilt when they do it a pleasurable treat. For someone like this, rest isn't pleasure, it's work and it sucks. So if you're having trouble resting, make it your job. Don't look at it as a soft, pleasant thing that if you finish your work, you get to do it. Think of yourself as a Viking that's preparing for war. And it's your job to get in the fucking bubble bath and be present to a moment of calm because it strengthens you. And that is part of the process of dominating your path. This is how you make stuff. Come up with bad ideas. Use quantity to enable quality. Make mistakes. Get rid of idealists. Set up useful limitations and understand the ones that are already in place. Let go of good ideas that don't serve you. Find the thing that makes everything else seem difficult and stop doing it. Do the things you can do and make something with one good trait and plenty of bad ones. As you develop greater ability in your field of interest, narrow your focus into certain activities but broaden your ability to change strategy within the activity. It's possible to be a jack of all trades within a single trade. As you become more adept at a specific skill, if you want to keep improving, then you have to start seeing the variability within the skill. Going from beginner to intermediate generally requires us to learn something straightforward, measured, and exact. But going from intermediate to advanced, you have to be willing to embrace chaos within the practice. Progressions and set sequences are required to begin learning a skill, but mastery requires improvisation and experimentation within the skill. The vaccine for boredom is interest, and you have the capacity to direct your interest. Your interest and curiosity isn't this vague, wandering thing that you have no control over. It is in the sense that we don't know what drives our core talents and interests, but you have the capacity to become interested in something by noticing with greater specificity. If you have to chop carrots and you don't want to chop carrots, you can exercise your sense of smell to try to tell the difference between different batches of carrots. You can work on your knife technique. You can work on your posture as you stand at the counter, and you can feel the sensations of your forearm muscles as you slice each carrot and try to better understand the mechanics of your body. You can meditate to the rhythm of each slice, breathing out for half a carrot and in with the next half. You can focus on the sound of your work to inform you on the sharpness of your knife or the angle of your cut. Or you can simply get in a comfortable pattern and spend time working on your plans for world domination. Boredom is for people who don't see what's right in front of them. Look closer. Be careful how you decide to improve things. Trying to make everything better at once is generally a disaster. Making the smallest thing better and then maintaining it over and over again until it's integrated into your life usually works. Do what usually works. The mind is a fantastic beast, and it's capable of thinking things real, unreal, useful, and useless. And in the middle of an existential crisis, sometimes the most challenging thing you can do is think something different. It's tempting to go down every mental rabbit hole our mind presents us with, but you shouldn't believe everything you think, and your thoughts should serve you. You shouldn't serve them. And what makes you braver? Struggling with the question your mind is trying to answer? The same question that a million other people are struggling with and being made miserable by? Or sidestepping it? Choosing to let go and thinking about something else. It's difficult because your pride wants you to answer the question. But if you want to level up, you have to let it go. Here's a reason why Bitcoin might be a good investment. Let's say you're managing a $500 million fund. You need to allocate that money into different areas so that it's not all in the same bucket of risk, but you still need to take on enough risk to make the fund grow. Bitcoin is something that could still go to zero, but if it continues to succeed, then it may be 10 times more valuable than it currently is. That means that if you put 1% of your assets in Bitcoin, then you're risking losing $5 million, but you might make $50 million. It's generally considered an acceptable risk to lose 1% of a portfolio on a confident bet that might result in a 10% gain. So as Bitcoin builds its reputation, it starts to become a no-brainer for any fund manager to invest. And when some managers do it, others jump on the bandwagon to follow suit. This turns the prophecy of a 10x investment into a self-fulfilling one. If large institutions moved 1% of their alternative asset allocation into Bitcoin, then Bitcoin would be worth $36,000. There's roughly $9 trillion worth of gold in the world. If Bitcoin matches the market cap of gold, then the price would be about $500,000 per Bitcoin. If this happened and the value of the dollar was cut in half over the next 40 years like it was in the previous 40 years, then that would be awfully close to $1 million a coin. I don't actually care about any of this. None of this means anything without real human behavior behind it. I'm interested in the fact that a billionaire is currently buying $2,000 of Bitcoin every second. That Grayscale Bitcoin Trust owns more than 500,000 Bitcoin, and they're buying more Bitcoin per month than are being mined. And that institutional investors are preparing their funds to be ready to buy in when a Bitcoin ETF is finally released in the public markets. These aren't the actions of rookie retail investors excited about a trend. These are the actions of wealthy people, preparing to make Bitcoin just another boring thing they own that is part of a logically risk-adjusted portfolio. Now that's interesting. Being low energy doesn't mean you're depressed, but it's really easy to assume it does. Chronic fatigue mimics all the physical symptoms of depression, and a lot of people feel an inexplicable bout of tiredness that sets off a vicious downward spiral of depression. Besides the fact that fatigue mimics the physical aspects of depression, it also has a real effect on your capabilities that, if you aren't paying attention to, will depress you. The trick is to discern the difference between the two and work on them separately while understanding that they're also interrelated. You can rarely fix one of them completely without taking care of the other, but they need individual attention. There are specific ways to work on depression and specific ways to work on fatigue. Losing perspective in the mud of confusion that comes from being buried in the depths of the two is one of the blackest places on earth, but it's possible to find your way out by starting to identify them individually, a little at a time. Separate them enough to gain clarity, but respect their connectedness. 20% of your customers create 80% of your problems. In a large company, 20% of the employees do 80% of the work, and 80% of your results usually comes from 20% of your efforts. It's called the 80-20 rule, and it's everywhere. It means stop doing stupid things when possible. Find the key points that make a difference in your life and focus on them, letting go of the rest. Find the friendships that matter. Hire the people who will impactfully grow your business. Spend your time in the gym on the exercises that will get you the most results. And spend your money on stuff that matters, because if you haven't made a decision to do otherwise, you're likely wasting 80% of your disposable income. 80% of your work usually isn't actually getting work done, so get rid of it and look for the 20% that does, and your productivity will go through the roof. Apply this across your life, and you will level up. think I would have gotten the most respect from my family if I'd gotten a job digging ditches in a construction company and slowly worked my way up. And I would have made way more money than I made in the first 10 years of my job life, because that's actually a super respectable career path, and you can go far working at a construction company that gives responsible workers a chance to take on more and more challenging tasks. But I didn't do that, because I didn't understand that you can totally do something like that and continue to develop in the area of your personal interest. It's just really hard, but pursuing your interests is almost always difficult, and you have to decide what kind of struggle you want. Do you want to struggle with money, time, attention, or something else? Every path will give you a struggle, but you get to choose which one if you understand that. Looking back, I probably would have studied code in college and gotten a job as a software engineer, which is the new construction work, or just taken a free course about it online, and pursued my other passions on the side until they created a sustainable income. Hindsight is misleading, but in my current shoes, I think I could have gotten where I am now by taking that path and had a lot more financial freedom along the way. Not letting yourself experience joy because you're afraid of losing it is like not charging a battery because you're afraid you might drain it later. Opportunity is something that could be that isn't yet. Sometimes opportunity is visible, sometimes invisible. It's everywhere and often feels like it's nowhere. Opportunity is the thing you take when you decide that things could be better in some way and you will make it so. It's also referred to as taking a chance or a risk, because there is no opportunity without danger and fear, because by nature, opportunity is something new and unknown. Opportunity can increase and decrease at an exponential rate. Imagine going to a party and seeing someone you decide to become friends with. That was an opportunity taken. Then that new friend introduces you to 3 more friends. Those are 3 opportunities you didn't have before that are now yours. The same thing happens with taking on jobs and creative pursuits. The more opportunities you take, the more you get. So take the chance, take the opportunity, go risk it. Go do something. The danger never goes away, but your options expand along with your ability to decide which one to take and your ability to take them on. And taking on that danger makes you dangerous, which is way better. Opportunity is an open vulnerability to noticing and exploring, and having a willingness to be wrong and being dangerous enough to know you can handle it. A lot of times, what gets you from step 0 to step 1 will not get you to step 2, but you have to do it. For example, to play the violin, you have to teach it wrong. You can't teach a child to play the violin perfectly the first time. You have to get them to hold the thing. You have to get them to move the objects and just get used to the experience. By the nature of them picking it up, they actually learn bad habits within the first 5 minutes. No matter, how accurately you show them things. Because if you were to show it to them perfectly, they'd just go home. It would just be too annoying. So you have to get them to hold the thing and just make sense of it. And then the next step is getting them to do something different. What got them to the first step does not get them to the second step. They have to change their behavior on the second step. And our reward systems are built around repeated behavior. So if we start from 0 and we get to 1 and it's a success, our mind tells us that we should do that thing again. We should do that thing again to get to step 2, which is a problem because you need something new. So in the case of getting to that edge of your ability, like that point of tension where a teacher can help out, it's really great. But at the same time, you're constantly reinforcing to your reward systems that you need to be at the edge of your ability. It's very common to have a musician or a martial artist or somebody who plays chess, anybody that's learning a highly intricate skill that's been studied and developed over the years. They'll get in the habit of hitting the edge of their ability because they have to, because this is 0 to 1. They have to get as much knowledge in their mind as possible. They have to start that way. But then once they're there, there's a certain point where they have to sit with it. And that's kind of step 2. I mean, depending on how you break it down, it could be innumerable steps. But there's a point where what applied originally doesn't apply anymore. And you'll find a hang up here amongst tons of people that are at intermediate in any skill, where they're stuck because they always want to learn the new thing. And what they need is more of the old thing.